The dust settled slowly across the mesa that afternoon in 1873, but Thomas Granger would remember every detail with crystalline clarity for the rest of his life. He was 14 years old, standing frozen in the doorway of their modest ranch house, watching 6 men on horseback circle his father like wolves surrounding wounded prey. The sun beat down mercilessly on the New Mexico territory, and the air tasted of fear and coming violence. His father, Samuel Granger, stood in the yard with his hands raised, palms open in a gesture of peace. At 62, Samuel's back was still straight despite decades of hard labor, his weathered face marked by sun and wind but never by cruelty. He was a man who measured his words carefully and treated every living thing with respect, from the cattle he raised to the Apache people whose ancestral lands bordered his property. The leader of the mounted men, a rancher named Clayton Webb from the neighboring territory, spat tobacco juice into the dust. His eyes were cold as winter stones. Thomas had heard stories about Webb and his men. They called themselves a protection committee, but everyone knew they were little more than thugs who terrorized small ranchers and native people alike, stealing land through intimidation and violence. "You've been warned, Granger," Webb said, his voice carrying across the yard. "This land is too valuable to waste on a fool who'd rather befriend savages than his own kind. You've been trading with the Apache, teaching them our ways, letting them water their horses at your creek?" Samuel's voice remained steady, though Thomas could see his father's jaw tighten. "They were here first, Clayton. This was their land long before any of us arrived. Sharing water costs me nothing, and kindness has never made a man poor." Webb laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Kindness? Is that what you call it? While you're playing saint, the rest of us are trying to build something here. Those Apache need to understand this territory belongs to white men now." What happened next unfolded in slow motion in Thomas's memory. Webb dismounted, and his men followed. They surrounded Samuel, and when his father tried to step back toward the house, toward Thomas, one of them shoved him hard. Samuel stumbled, caught himself, and straightened again, still refusing to fight back. "Go inside, son," Samuel called out, his eyes finding Thomas in the doorway. "This isn't for you to see," but Thomas couldn't move. His feet felt rooted to the earth as he watched the first blow land across his father's face. Then another. Samuel fell to his knees, blood streaming from his nose, and still the blows continued. They beat him methodically, brutally, while Thomas stood paralyzed with horror and rage. When they finally mounted their horses and rode away, laughing and whooping as they went, Samuel lay motionless in the dust. Thomas ran to his father, tears streaming down his face. Samuel was breathing barely, his face swollen and bloodied. "Get help," he whispered through broken teeth. "Ride to Little Hawk's camp." "They'll know what to do." Thomas had met Little Hawk many times. The Apache medicine man had been coming to their ranch for years, sharing meals with Samuel, teaching Thomas about the desert plants and their healing properties. Samuel had learned Apache customs and language, and in return, he'd helped Little Hawk's people during harsh winters, sharing supplies when they needed them most. Thomas rode through the night, his horse's hooves pounding across the desert floor. He found the Apache camp just before dawn, and when he told them what had happened, Little Hawk's weathered face grew grave. They returned together, Little Hawk and 3 other Apache men, and they carried Samuel inside. For 3 days, Little Hawk worked to save him, using herbs and ancient healing practices. Samuel survived, but he would never fully recover. His ribs healed wrong, his hearing in one ear was gone forever, and he moved like a man 20 years older. But something else had changed in those 3 days. Thomas had sat with Little Hawk, listening to the medicine man speak about justice and balance, about the Apache way of protecting family and honoring debts. Little Hawk told him stories of Apache warriors, of courage and loyalty, of standing against those who brought violence to peaceful people. "Your father saved my grandson's life 2 winters ago," Little Hawk said one evening, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "A snake bit him, and your father rode through a blizzard to bring medicine. Among my people, such a debt is sacred. What was done to your father was done to all of us." 6 months passed. Samuel recovered slowly, but the light in his eyes had dimmed. He moved through his days quietly, looking over his shoulder, jumping at sudden sounds. Thomas worked the ranch, but inside him, a fire burned. He remembered every detail of that day, every face, every laugh. He particularly remembered Webb's voice, cold and cruel. Then one morning, Thomas woke to find Little Hawk standing in their yard, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, stretching back across the mesa, were Apache warriors. Thomas counted them as they appeared over the rise, a seemingly endless line of mounted men. They kept coming until 400 warriors sat on horseback, silent and imposing, their presence transforming the landscape. Samuel emerged from the house, leaning on his cane, his eyes wide with shock. "Little Hawk, what is this?" The medicine man dismounted and approached Samuel with dignity. "You are my brother," he said simply. "You treated my people with honor when others showed us only hatred. You shared your water, your food, your knowledge. You taught your son to see us as human beings, not enemies. And when you were struck down for this kindness, the debt became ours to repay." Little Hawk turned to Thomas. "You rode through the night to find us when your father was dying. You showed courage and loyalty. These warriors have come to show Webb and his men what happens when someone harms our family. We do not seek war, but we will not allow such injustice to stand." The 400 warriors rode to Webb's ranch that day, with Thomas and Samuel following at a distance. They surrounded his property, a silent wall of strength and unity. Webb emerged from his house, his face draining of color as he understood the magnitude of what faced him. Little Hawk spoke to him in English, his words carrying across the yard. "You beat a good man because he showed kindness to my people. You thought him weak because he chose peace over violence. But you failed to understand that true strength lies not in cruelty, but in the bonds we forge with others. Samuel Granger has 400 brothers now. Touch him again, or any of his family, or any of my people, and you will answer to all of us." Webb said nothing. There was nothing to say. He had built his power on fear and intimidation, but standing before him was something far greater than fear. It was justice, it was loyalty, and it was the undeniable truth that kindness creates bonds stronger than any forged through violence. The warriors didn't attack, they didn't need to. They had made their point simply by appearing, by standing together. Webb sold his ranch within a month and left the territory. His men scattered. Word spread throughout New Mexico about what had happened, and the story became legend. The old rancher who chose kindness over hatred, and whose simple act of sharing water with his Apache neighbors brought 400 warriors to his defense. Years later, when Thomas was grown with children of his own, he would tell them this story. He would tell them that his father taught him the most important lesson of his life on that dusty ranch. That true strength isn't measured in violence or intimidation, but in how we treat others, especially those whom society tells us to fear or hate. That small acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we cannot imagine, creating bonds that endure beyond our understanding. Samuel lived another 20 years, never fully recovering from his injuries, but surrounded by respect and protected by friendship that crossed cultural divides. And Thomas never forgot the sight of 400 Apache warriors appearing over the mesa, coming to defend an old rancher who had simply believed that sharing water and treating people with dignity was the right thing to do no matter what others might think.